When you think of high-stakes international drama, you're probably picturing spies or battles, right? Movie stuff. But what if I told you one of the most tense standoffs I've come across played out in, of all places, a courtroom, and in a bunch of really angry letters? That's the story we're diving into. It's this incredible tale of two tracks running at the same time. One all about diplomacy and law, and the other, pure conflict.
So here's the central problem. How do you solve a border dispute that's literally underwater? I mean, think about it. You've got two countries, a shared sea, and a potential fortune in oil and gas just sitting on the seabed. Who draws the line? And how? Well, in this story, the answer is kind of like a two-part thriller.
First, you go the official route. You take your case to the world's highest court. The International Court of Justice. It's the civilized, by-the-book, diplomatic way to do things.
But, and this is where it gets good, at the exact same time, there's a whole other track running in parallel. And this one is messy. It's a high-stakes standoff, playing out through some very sharply worded letters. This is where the real drama is. So let's see how these two completely different approaches played out between Tunisia and Libya.
All right, so let's kick things off on what we're calling the courtroom track. In the beginning, everything seems to be going smoothly. Both countries actually agree that, hey, there's got to be a better way to solve this than fighting.
And here it is, December 1st, 1978. On this day, Tunisia officially hands over a special agreement to the World Court. This is huge. It means both Tunisia and Libya have agreed to let international law figure out who owns this very valuable piece of undersea real estate.
So what exactly are they fighting over? It's something called the Continental Shelf. And you've got to understand, this isn't just about drawing a line on a map. The Continental Shelf is the submerged part of the continent, and it can be incredibly rich in oil and gas. So for these nations, this is a massive deal. Control the shelf, you control the potential for immense wealth.
Okay, so the agreement is filed. And with that, the slow, steady, and, well, let's be honest, kind of bureaucratic gears of international justice start to turn. This is the calm, procedural part of the story.
And you can really see just how methodical this whole process is. Check this out. The case gets filed in December 78. A couple of months later, in February 79, Libya picks its special judge for the case. They call them ad hoc judges. Tunisia does the same thing that December. Then the court steps in and sets the big deadline, May 30th, 1980. That's the day both sides have to hand in their big written arguments, called memorials. So on the surface, right, everything looks like it's moving along just perfectly, orderly, professional.
But while all the lawyers are busy writing their briefs and filing their paperwork, something totally different is going down out on the open sea. So now, let's switch gears and jump over to our second track, the water track.
And this right here is the crucial point. The legal process, it's kind of chugging along in its own little bubble of rules and deadlines. But the real world, it doesn't just stop for paperwork. The very spot they're arguing about is suddenly becoming a hotbed of activity.
And then this happens. A bombshell drops. In the summer of '79, Tunisia sends a formal diplomatic note. And they don't just have a vague complaint, they have the exact coordinates. They've spotted a drilling rig, the Scarabeo 3, hired by Libya, and it's operating in what Tunisia is convinced are the disputed waters. Just like that, the calm is completely shattered.
I mean, the accusation here is incredibly direct and serious. Tunisia is basically saying, hey, we agreed to let the court decide the border, but you guys are already out there drilling for oil. They're accusing Libya of jumping the gun, trying to pull resources out of a zone that technically doesn't belong to anyone yet. Or, from Tunisia's point of view, a zone that belongs to them.
So what happens next is this rapid-fire exchange of diplomatic notes. It's basically a war of words that shows you just how deep the tension was running right below the surface of all those legal proceedings. Tunisia's first shot is a clear and urgent demand. Stop the drilling and get that rig out of there immediately. And Libya's response? It's just as sharp. They call it a flagrant interference and an encroachment upon its sovereignty, which is diplomatic speak for, mind your own business, this is our territory.
So Tunisia fires right back, but this time with a legal argument. They say the rig is in a litigious zone, an area that's actively being disputed in court, and that neither side should be doing anything that could mess with the final ruling. Did Libya's stance change? Not one bit. They just doubled down, saying the rig was in their territory, full stop. End of discussion.
And just when you think it can't get any more tense, it does. The situation escalates. We're now in February of 1980.
right as the court is getting all its deadlines in order, and Tunisia spots a second drilling rig, this one called the Gulnar. So now, this isn't looking like a one-off mistake anymore. It's starting to look like a pattern.
At this point, the language in these letters gets even more heated. Tunisia now says it condemns with force what it calls an escalation of its provocations. And Libya's retort? They accuse Tunisia of artificially creating situations based on unfounded conjectural data. Basically, they're saying Tunisia is just making things up. The diplomatic gloves are completely, totally off.
So you've got all this anger, all these accusations flying back and forth. You'd think the whole court case would just completely implode, right? I mean, how can you cooperate in a courtroom when you're practically at each other's throats out on the water? Well, that's what makes what happens next so surprising.
And, the rest of the world was definitely paying attention. This wasn't some private squabble happening in a vacuum. Other countries were watching very, very closely. You can even see it here in this correspondence. Ambassadors from places like Canada and the United States are formally asking for copies of the case files. Everybody wanted to know what was going on. And then we get to the punchline of this whole chapter. Despite the diplomatic firestorm, despite the angry letters, despite the drilling rigs out at sea, on May 30th, 1980, the exact deadline the court had set, both Tunisia and Libya walked into the International Court of Justice and filed their official arguments. Against all odds, the legal process actually held.
So those two tracks we've been talking about, the one of conflict and the one of cooperation, they finally converged. The legal battle was officially on. But it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? In a dispute this tense, with so much at stake, can the slow, deliberate process of the law really be enough to keep the peace? That's something to think about.